Okay, so the first one is simplifying, showing all work. So we have the 7 over negative 3i. So the 3i isn't, if the 3 isn't the problem, the I is the problem. Okay. And so that's why I multiply by this very fancy 1, my I over I. When I multiply across, I have 7i over 3i squared. My I squared, well, that becomes negative 1. And so this is 7i over negative 3. And so you can have 7i over negative 3 or negative 7i over 3. So either of those would be fine as an answer. Okay, the next one, I have negative 3 over 9i. Yes, you can simplify beforehand. So I multiply by I over I, my fancy 1. This is going to be 3i, I'm not going to forget my negative, over 9i squared. That's negative 3i over 9 times negative 1. When I rewrite this, I'm actually going to put the negative with the 3, so this is going to be negative 3i over negative 9. The greatest common factor, or the GCD, of 3 and 9 is going to be negative 3. And so I know this is just going to be I, or 1i, and this is going to be 3. So it's either 1i over 3, or you can have I over 3. Either of those are fine. Either. Okay. Next one, 3 plus 3i over 8i. Again, you ignore the 8, you just multiply by your fancy 1. Now, when you have a binomial, two terms in the numerator, you're going to put parentheses around it. So you do distributive property. That's going to be 3i plus 3i squared over 8i squared. In this case, you're going to replace the two I squareds. You're going to replace this one here and this one here. So this is going to be 3i plus 3 times negative 1 over 8 times negative 1. That's 3i minus 3 over negative 8. You want to rewrite it. Is there a GCD of 3, 3, and 8? No. Okay. We do rewrite it, so the constant, the number that doesn't have the I in it, your real part, your real number comes first, plus 3i over negative 8. Okay. If you don't have a negative in the denominator, you could also see this as, to get rid of the negative in the denominator, you change the signs of both parts. So you could also have positive 3 minus 3i over positive 8. Okay, so you could have this or this. Okay, either of those is acceptable. Number 4, negative 8 plus 8i over negative 2i, multiply by I over I. Okay, so this is going to be negative 8i plus 8i squared over negative 2 times I squared, negative 8i plus 8 times negative 1 over negative 2 times negative 1, negative 8i minus 8 over 2. I look at this and there's a greatest common factor. 2 actually goes into negative 8 and 2 goes into negative 8. So that's what I'm going to do. Sometimes you don't have to find the greatest common factor. You can just divide each part by the denominator. Okay, you need to make sure you spread the love with this. So this is negative 4i minus 4. But when we rewrite it, it's going to be negative 4 minus 4i. Two over 5 minus 5i. We're going to do what's called multiply by the conjugate. So we're going to multiply this by 5 plus 5i, 5 plus 5i. Now for here, you're going to do a box for all intents and purposes. This is going to be 5 minus 5i, 5 plus 5i. Okay, so we have our 25 here, 25i, negative 25i, and negative 25i squared. Okay, so when I rewrite this part, I'm just going to do distributive property. This is going to be 10 plus 10i over. Now these add to be 0, so I'm just left with the 25 minus 25i squared. Okay, what I have to do is I have to replace my I squared with negative 1. So this is going to be 10 plus 10i over 25 minus 25 times negative 1. Some of you guys have that opposite thing down. 10 plus 10i over 25 plus 25. So now we have 10 plus 10i over 50. Okay, now we find our greatest common factor. Oh, good Lord. I don't know what's happening here. Oh, goodness gracious. 0, 3, review. Go back to mine. Sorry about that. That is just a mess, isn't it? Okay. So, there we go. Okay, so we have 10 plus 10i over 50. Now we find the GCD of 10, 10, and 50. And you can do that in Desmos. Make sure you go to the graphing calculator. You put the 3 numbers in. I'm just going to remind you. Okay, I should have had that open. So you go to Functions, Miscellaneous, GCD, and you put your numbers in. Just don't put negatives in. So 10, 10, and 50 if you don't know that, and it's going to be, of course, 10. But, okay, so the GCD is 10, so you divide each part by 10. Okay, and so that's going to be 1 plus 1i over 5, or you could have 1 plus I over 5. So those are your 2 possibilities. And I apologize for that little snafu. The next one, 10i over negative 3 plus 6i. I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. We keep that. That's still negative. The only thing that changes is that sign between. Okay, this part I can just do distributive property. This part I have to do a box. So that's negative 3 plus 6i, negative 3 minus 6i. Okay, so that's positive 9, positive 18i, negative 18i, and negative 36i squared. Okay, so here, this is going to be negative 30i minus 60i squared over, now remember, if you do this right, this should always be 0, that diagonal should always be 0, so this is going to be 9 minus 36i squared. Now you can skip that step if you just want to write it as the opposite, that's fine too. Some of you guys have found that pattern. Negative 30i minus 60 times negative 1. 9 minus 36 times negative 1. Negative 30i plus 60 over 9 plus 36. I combine my like terms. So actually I'm going to rewrite the top. The top I'm going to rewrite as 60 minus 30i. 9 plus 36 is 45. Now you find the greatest common factor of 60, 30, and 45. So GCD. So 60, 30, and 45. If you don't know it. You can find it yourself too. GCD of 60, make sure you put commas, 30, and 45, and it's going to be 15. Okay, so what you do is you go back and you divide everything by 15. This by 15, this by 15, and this by 15. So 15 goes into 60, that's going to be 4, goes into 30, 2i times, and goes into 45 3 times. And there you go, that's your answer. Number 7, negative 6 minus 9i over 3 minus 2i. I multiply by the conjugate, which is going to be, and I always put all of these in parentheses. Okay, when you have a double parentheses, that's when you know you're going to have to do the box. This is going to be 3 plus 2i, and this is 3 plus 2i. So now I have two boxes. I'm going to have a box for the denominator. Okay, so that's going to be 3 minus 2i, 3 plus 2i. So I'm going to do that one first. 9, 6i, negative 6i, and negative 4i squared. For my top, I have another box. That's going to be negative 6 minus 9i, 3 plus 2i. It's going to be negative 18, negative 12i, negative 27i, and negative 18i squared. Okay, so I guess we'll go with green. So in my fraction, I know these added to be 0. I don't think I like how the color of that one. Yeah, we'll go back to purple, I guess. So those added to be 0. These ones added to be negative 27. Negative 12 is negative 39i. Okay, so when I rewrite this, and I'm actually going to do it down here. So we have my denominator, that's going to be 9 minus 4i squared, and my numerator is going to be the negative 18 minus 39i minus 18i squared. Okay, so let me just erase all this because I know it can be kind of confusing. So we're going to go on from here. I'm going to replace all, oh, good lord. I'm going to replace all of my I squareds with negative 1, so this ends up being negative 18 minus 39i minus 18 times negative 1 over 9 minus 4 times negative 1. This ends up being negative 18 minus 39i plus 18 over 9 plus 4, okay, which is equal to negative 39i over 13. 13 goes into 39 3 times, so my answer is negative 3i. It's kind of a crazy one. And last but not least, so we have negative 3 plus I over negative 2 minus 6i. I first multiply by the conjugate. That's going to be still negative 2, put our parentheses around here, plus 6i, and negative 2 plus 6i. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two boxes. We have one box for my denominator. Okay, it's going to be negative 2 minus 6i, negative 2 plus 6i. I'm going to go through and multiply that out. That's 4, negative 12i, positive 12i, there we go, negative 36i squared. And we have a second box right here. for the numerator, which is negative 3 plus I, negative 2 plus 6I. This is 6, negative 18I, negative 2I, 6I squared. Okay, so things to remember, I add my diagonals, those were equal to 0. So my denominator is of course going to be 4 minus 36I squared. I no longer have just plain old i's in here. These two here, well, that's negative 20I. So this is 6 minus 20I plus 6I squared. So I replace my I squareds with negative 1. So this is going to be 6 minus, dropped my I, minus 20I minus 6 over 4 plus 36. This is negative 20I over 40. This can be simplified because the greatest common factor is going to be negative 1I over 2 or I over 2. And those are your two answers. And that's about it.